During its operations, the Commission communicated with and provided services to the public in both official languages.
Final report of more than 2,000 pages available in both official languages. It summarizes the documents, interviews, and evidence that the Commission examined during its investigation. The majority of the information created by the Commission was disseminated on its website and is also available in both official languages. L'approche de la Commission était conforme.
The Commission's approach was consistent with other commissions and with that required by federal courts under Part 3 of the Official Languages Act, where evidence can be filed in either official language.
Provided the committee with 2 tables summarizing the number of files that we have received from the Commission. However, we recognize that an itemized list of documents may be more helpful to this committee. Since that time, we have created a working copy of the Commission's collection for analysis and have been able to get a more accurate count of the total number of files. We can prepare itemized lists for certain categories of documents, such as the evidence submitted by the Government of Canada, as well as evidence published on the Commission's website, if the committee believes that this would be helpful for its important work. Le BCP serait
PCO would be happy to continue working with the committee to identify sets of documents that could be submitted for translation in phases. We are committed to respecting Canada's official languages and to providing committee members with information to support their work.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you again today. I look forward to answering your questions alongside my colleagues from Public Services and Procurement Canada.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. Lindberger.
Bonsoir. Bonsoir, Madame la Présidente.
Hello, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. Joining me today are Annie Plouffe, Acting Vice President, Policy and Corporate Services, and Matthew Ball, Vice President, Services to Parliament and Interpretation. Thank you for inviting us to appear before you today on behalf of the Translation Bureau. Ever since its creation 90 years ago in 1934, the Translation Bureau has played a key role in upholding the equality of status and the equal rights and privileges accorded to English and French in the Canadian Constitution.
Our translators translate your reports and minutes, and our interpreters make it possible for you to hold your session in both official languages. And I will take this opportunity to thank Tatiana Pocklington, Najet Glenza, and Anaïs Haynes, who are interpreting this very important session today. Since 1995, the federal government, departments, and agencies have had the option of doing business with other suppliers for translation. Nevertheless, the Bureau still remains the primary supplier of translation, interpretation, and terminology services in both official languages, as well as indigenous languages, foreign languages, and sign languages. Bien sûr que nos 700
Of course, our 700 or so translators, about 100 of whom do parliamentary translation, don't work on their own. In 2022-23, we outsourced approximately a large volume of our business to the private sector. This allows us to translate each year for Parliament and the government almost 380 million words, or 1.4 million pages. We also use technology such as machine translation, AI, to increase our capacity while making sure that the output is revised by a qualified translator to guarantee quality. Our focus on ensuring both efficiency and quality makes the Translation Bureau a partner of choice, especially for large, complex projects such as the translation of documents for the Rouleau Inquiry.
I can confirm, Madam Chair, that the Translation Bureau provided to the Privy Council Office with cost estimates in the fall of 2023. I'd like to give you an idea of the scope of the work involved. Translating all the Rouleau Inquiry document, as mentioned in this committee, would take several years of work for the Translation Bureau. Even the last request for an estimate that we receive for the translation of only a portion of the documents involve about 124,000 pages and an estimate at a cost of $16 million. Certains facteurs liés à ce projet rendront le processus de
Other factors would make this extremely complex. The legal tenor means that we would have to find specialized translators. Some of the documents are also handwritten, which would mean that we would have to manipulate them before dealing with them. Some of the documents are also classified, which means that we could not use non-secure tools such as machine translation or our private sector suppliers. Not to mention that simply managing these millions of pages of documents would require a huge amount of work on its own. Madam Chair.
explanation helpful. Since you began your work, the Translation Bureau has been there to support you, just as we supported the Rouleau inquiry. Our legal translators were also there to translate Justice Mosley's decision, and we have the expertise you need, and will continue to be available whenever you require high-quality linguistic services. My colleagues and I are now ready to answer your question. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. According to the motion we adopted on Tuesday, April 5th, we will begin our first round. That'll be a 5-minute round, and we will begin with Mr. Motz.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much for Translation Bureau and PCO officials for being here. It is really appreciated, and it's something that we've been working toward hearing from you personally for some time. Now, in the correspondence to the committee, I believe, the PCO, you mentioned that there were approximately 265,000 records representing about 152,000 unique documents that were tabled before the Rouleau Commission. Now, the Commission only posted about 8,900 of those on their website, which means you guys did that, PCO did that, correct?
We worked with them. They ran their website.
Okay, fair enough. Now, so can you explain to the Canadian public who might be asking why the Rouleau Commission had access to 143,000 documents that which Canadians never existed? Now, I understand some of them might be sensitive in nature, or as indicated otherwise, but why they don't have access to them today, and whether you, as the PCO, can determine what status they're at, what exists, like what are those documents are, and why they haven't been able to be accessed by Canadians.
So thank you very much for your question. Perhaps I'll give a little bit of context in terms of our role and the role of the Commission. So during the Commission, they're completely independent. They run their information management. They run their internal email. We provide support. We provide them systems, and we provide them advice. At the end of a commission, effectively, we're handed those files in electronic form, paper form, but there's not necessarily a lot of information about what's in the individual files. So to actually know what's in them, we'd have to open them, kind of go through them, and make some determinations. At a high level, what I can tell you is that within the 152,000 documents that you mentioned, there's a mix of, I'd say, 4 broad categories. There's the documents that the Government of Canada provided, and that could be a mix of cabinet confidences, top secret information, and protected B information. That's about 31,000 unique files. In addition to that, there were 88,000 files that were productions from other parties. And so, as you know, there were a number of parties withstanding who submitted documents. And so this is the documents that were submitted by, whether it be provinces or police services or independent citizens that are contained in there. In addition, there's the individual documents that have been created by the Commission itself. And so there's 22,000 files that we have determined that were created by the Commission itself. And then there's internal documents. Think of HR, finance, those internal administrative documents, about 11,000. And so in keeping with what's been done in past commissions, there's a website created by the Commission with the final report and the information that it deems the public should have access to. Just like any... And the Commission makes that determination.
Okay, thank you.
And then,
so I have limited time.
I apologize.
And I appreciate some of that. I want to get to kind of something that you said in your testimony that I found very helpful. So at our committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, we adopted a motion respecting the prioritization of document translation requests. Now, that motion was left somewhat open-ended so we could benefit from your testimony today. So I was pleased to hear that you had some suggestions on what you've done already to help us as a committee determine what documents we might need, what might not need. And can you explain that a little bit further for us? I know you just brushed over it, but you've created a catalog, some items that you think would be important for our deliberations today. Can you just explain that a bit further for us, please?
What we've tried to create is a bit of a sense of what's in those documents. And so I gave you those 4 large categories. Within that, we can give subcategories of the types of documents. We have found that we have the ability, depending on the database used, so that the government documents are in what's called Ringtail, which is a legal software that we use for many different purposes. It's quite easy for us to determine what's in those documents. We would still have to review some of them before releasing them for reasons that you appreciate. In the other documents that are contained in other types of databases, what we can find is a file name, potentially the number of pages. We are finding generally the file name would be, email to so-and-so or document related to X. And so we think that could be helpful to the committee if they were to see information like that.
In an index. You're talking about some sort of an index.
An index
what
defined
specifically?
a certain way.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you were talking the 8,000 some documents what's in the that are on the website? Or are you talking a broader range?
So the 8,000 on the website would be evidence that was submitted in one language or another. We know what that is. We can translate that. We've told you what the cost is. In addition, for the other documents within the 152,000, we believe we could work with the committee to come up with at least a list of this is what the documents are. And
I think it'll come out in other evidence. Member of Parliament, Mr. Nakvi, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses there. The gentleman from PCO, sorry, I can't remember your name right now. Can you just finish your thought? I want to make sure that we hear your answer.
I appreciate the opportunity to finish the thought. We could give these file names. We believe in some cases they would be quite helpful in determining what's in the document, and you may select of that 152,000, perhaps there's only 5,000 that are truly of interest, and then we can focus our attention on translating and reviewing those documents rather than this really large group of documents that, as my colleague mentioned, would take years and large amounts of taxpayer-funded contributions to be able to translate. So our goal is really to help you narrow down where you would like to focus attention and then to do everything we can to get that to you in an expedited fashion. It's worth noting that those individual titles are not written in both official languages, and so we would have to work with the clerk of the committee to determine, are you comfortable receiving a list that is not translated? Would you like us to translate that list, which would add time? We are open to whatever this committee would like us to do. We truly do want to find a solution that supports the work of this committee, but in a timely manner and not years from now.
So, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that suggestion that you're making, how long would that process take in your estimation?
I think the main question, and I'm not asking for an answer clearly here, would be whether it needs to be translated. I think if it didn't need to be translated, we think we could do it relatively quickly. We're talking within weeks. We would want to kind of go through that, do a quick check to make sure that there's no titles that have, for example, personal confidential information that we need to be cognizant of. And so I think we still have to do a little bit of due diligence, but I think we could do it quickly. If translation is involved, we would need to work with our colleagues. We're talking 152,000 lines of information, extrapolate out. It's probably months and certainly not weeks for us to get that translated. And so we are completely open to what this committee would like, respecting the fact that you have every right to ask for it translated if that is what you would like.
Great, thank you. Well, the translation piece is important. I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that I belong to a political party that for which bilingualism is a very important aspect of who we are as Canadians. So I appreciate what you're saying. My question is, have you seen a request like this before? Is this quite unique in terms of the work you do, both from a PCO perspective and from Translation Bureau's point of view?
Speaking for PCO, I've now supported 4 commissions of inquiry, and I'm supporting the current commission of inquiry into foreign interference. I have never seen a request to get all documents. As I mentioned, our role is really just providing arm's length support. We happen to hold on to these documents until they go to the archivists at Library and Archives Canada so that the public, the media, and others can access them after review. It just so happens that we've received this request at a time that we're the holders of the document, and therefore it's our responsibility to respond. So it is unique in that respect. I cannot recall, certainly in my 6 years doing this role, a request like this, and that is why we look at this as unique, and we're looking for unique solutions to the issue at hand.
And from Translation Bureau's perspective?
Very much, Madam Chair, for the question. That's a very good point. From a commission standpoint, it's exactly what my colleague from PCO is saying. But I can also report that since 2020, we've seen a significant increase in the number of words being asked for translation from the Parliament. Just since 2020, about 30% of increase. There's other work in committees that is also coming out with large requests as we speak, and we're supporting all of these. It depends in this case if it's, like I mentioned in my opening remark, the Translation Bureau, it's like operating in a two business model. So for the Parliament, we're offering services to committees. When it comes down to departments, then we are working independently with departments, so depending on where the documents are coming from. But by and large, there is a significant increase, almost by 30% since 2020. Merci.
So if we look at the two options that is before us, one is on the track that we are on, which is to have all documents translated, and the other that's been suggested by Mr. Shea from PCO. For either one of them, can you share with us what kind of impact that would have on your existing workload in terms of supporting the Parliament, its committees, in terms of additional work or requirements for staff or personnel?
So if it's from a Translation Bureau perspective, I believe that we provided, when we provided our quotes, like Mr. Shea said, for the, it was mentioned several times in the committee, the index, but in fact it was 124,000 document, and we provided a quote of 10 months. The only thing I would like to add, Madam Chair, is we can provide document as we translate them. So if there's a prioritization, that's something that we can work with as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Berner, Mr. Ball, Ms. Plouffe, Mr. Shea, Ms. Freeland, thank you for being here. We hadn't heard from you before today, but we had lots of questions following the letters we received from you over the past few months. Mr. Shea, when you say this is the first time you're in this kind of situation, does that mean that usually in commissions of inquiry there's no translation? The documents are used and they are not translated?
Pour donner un petit peu de...
To give you a few more details, there are several different kinds of documents. So for documents that are provided to the public, they have to be translated. But for internal documents, it's not the same.
Example, under the Order in Council, the final report had to be translated. The public...
Mais moi, je parle juste de la preuve, là.
I'm just talking about evidence here. Commissioner Rouleau, I'm convinced, speaks English and French perfectly well. And it's possible that his staff also speaks both official languages, but not necessarily. But when these people draft documents, it seems to me they should be able to correctly understand the body of evidence before them. So is there any time when someone says, and maybe this is for the Translation Bureau, listen, we've just heard from this witness, we need a version in the other official language. Is that something that happens? Mr. Limburger might be able to answer.
Si je peux répondre.
Madam Chair, if I may, I can answer this question. We received a request for translation and for interpretation at the Rouleau Commission. The Rouleau Commission also dealt with the private sector for some portions of their work. So they especially requested our help for specialized services, especially when you're dealing with secured documents or confidential documents. We did offer many services to them, but we didn't translate all those documents. Okay, so can you tell us approximately how many documents were translated for the Commission? Maybe I can ask Madame Plouffe. Thank you, Madam Chair. The number of documents that we translated, it was some of the chapters of the Rouleau report. Given my time is limited, we know the decision exists in both languages. I would like to focus on the evidence. Which part of the evidence was translated by the Translation Bureau? Do you have an idea? To my knowledge, we did not translate any of the evidence. And you didn't translate any of the witnesses either? Their testimony? I mean, I know that you did provide interpretation, but you didn't have to translate any stenographer's notes, for example. Exactly. So we know that the Rouleau Commission worked with the documents and the testimony, the language that they were provided, without translation, either translation into English or into French. If I may, Madam Chair, we can't presume that because, as Mr. Limburger said, the Commission dealt with private firms, so the Translation Bureau can't tell you to what extent they worked with translated documents. Is it possible to know which private firms the Rouleau Commission dealt with for translation? Madam Chair, I don't have that information. Mr. Shea?
Verify whether they used any private translation. I'm not aware that they did, but they may have, as parts of the final report, just due to the time crunch, they may have used some private translation. But I would just reiterate, their obligations under the Official Languages Act are for the external documents, the documents that they put on their website, the documents that they release to the public, and of course the hearings, just like today, had to have interpretation, and we had to have translation of the documents. Internal documents, just like the Government of Canada, can be in either official language. And so it is worth noting, given we haven't looked through every single email, we are assuming that it's translation from English to French. The reality is there will also be some translation from French to English, as you point out.
Monsieur.
Sorry, the time is up, Mr. Fortin.
Merci.
5 minutes? 5 minutes, Mr. Green.
The time goes by fast.
It
I have to
does.
say, in all my time, I haven't had the pleasure, Mr. Limburger or folks from interpretation and translation, to be here. And I just want to say right off the top that in all my time in Parliament, your interpretation services, translation services, the things that help us stay bilingual are world class. I've traveled around, I've gone to other conferences where they had it, but certainly our interpretive services are world class, and I just wanted to say that off the top. I'm trying to get a better understanding, though, just in terms of the scope. And I think if I could perhaps make one admission of guilt in this committee, is I wish perhaps we had consulted with you prior to really voting on the motion that ultimately would have sent this volume of documents for translation. I think in fairness to us at the time, we weren't even sure ourselves just how much it was we were dealing with, but we made the best decision with the information we had. So with that being said, Mr. Limburger, in terms of the scope of work, if you could just give us a bit of an understanding, and for the public that are watching, roughly how many staff members would you have working in translation services?
Yeah. So, Madame la Présidente, so as I mentioned, totally at the Translation Bureau, we translate about 350 million words a year. That's for the entire translation across the government, including Parliament. And then when we do have 700 translators, and 100 of those are assigned to the work of the Parliament per se. Of course, for these type of requests, we have to augment our staff, not only through the people that are under Mr. Ball here who are there to support you. We're also looking elsewhere in the Translation Bureau, the people that are offering other services to augment. As we mentioned, again, we are just operating based on the request for quote that we got, so we haven't seen the document. I want to be prudent here, but this is why we've said 424,000 pages. We've estimated the work for 10 months, and that's taking into consideration all the other work that we're doing for other committees that is currently going.
And I did recall you making an analysis, but for my sake, you have to maybe break it down even more simplistically. Yeah. How many people and how many person hours would that look like in terms of the time?
So I'll turn to Madame Plouffe just for the number of hours per se that a translator can do. But one thing I would like to clarify is not only when the document comes in, the translation doesn't start immediately. Of course, we have to receive the document. You probably have all seen that a lot of document contains pictures, graph, all kinds of tabulation. So there's a team, the project management team, they're trying to assess what needs to be done in the document before it goes to the translator. So we do have a team of people that are making sure that the pre-production is being done. So in our quote, not only we have the time of the translator, Madam Chair, we also have the time of the people that will have to unpack. And as we mentioned, more and more, the volume that we see, we're getting social media, video, handwritten stuff, pictures, screen grab. So the format is getting more and more complex before we can pass it on to a translator who can use the translation, the automation, and the tool to do their work. At the end, depending on the type of document, we also have a quality control check that is being done on those documents. So that's kind of the chain of work before the document comes back to you.
And while I appreciate that, if we could we maybe get a scope on what that looks like? Because what I'm trying to do is get a sense for, you have your regular complement that are delegated to Parliament. What was the ask? I want to know, what was it that we asked of you over and above that, and what that would look like kind of as a percentage of your regular work?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So in terms of hours, we've calculated that to translate the 124,000 pages, that's our final estimate that we've provided, it would take us 160,000 hours. So if we do it all in one shot, to be able to do that. That also represents about, with all the force of the Translation Bureau, including our freelancers, 1 month of work. So we suspend everything and we do it with 1 month.
Let's be fair. It would be impossible to suspend everything.
Exactly.
And so if you were to just give me the snapshot in terms of pure numbers, what would it look like to do that? Number of workers.
The number of workers, I don't have the exact number of workers, but I can get
How many freelancers do you typically engage? Because you said your regular numbers plus your freelancers.
So we have 252 contracts in place right now that we use when we need to. And work like this, usually, depending on the types of documents, we will have a different contract. So, and that 252,000, contracts will help us do about half of our work annually. So they produce 60 million words per year.
Okay. And forgive me again, like I'm 5. I got 20 seconds, right? No? I got it here, 50. 700 plus 250, is that rough? Like we're talking about like 950 employees who'd be working on this for a month.
No, I would say contracts. It's more than that.
I see.
It depends, because some firms we will have access to tens of translators. So it really depends, and also depends on their availability.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Will you take the chairs?
Happily, I got my little timer here for you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Green's points. I'm particularly interested in understanding impact, because we can say we can do it a number of ways, but I'm trying to figure out as you go into the next few months how that impacts the Translation Bureau, given that you're probably anticipating outside of this committee a large number of documents coming through. Are you going to just give me a sense of that?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understand the actual question, but I'm going to try to answer it. So what you're trying to understand the scope of the work, and so right now we would have 600 of our translators that would be available to work on that, presuming that we don't do the rest of the work, and we would capitalize on our contracts and freelancers to be able to do that. But as we've evaluated the work that we have, without any recourse to any artificial intelligence, because we do not have the format of the documents, presuming that these are not classified, so we're not talking about secret, we feel that we'd be able to do it in about 10 months. The 124,000 pages without major impact or changing any of the impacts we have on the rest of our operations.
You're giving this committee your best advice, giving all things considered, perhaps narrowing the scope might be of benefit to getting some of the work done sooner. Would that be?
Listen, maybe I can answer that,
Please.
Madam Chair. That's a very good point. As I mentioned, and I've listened to the previous committee, there was reference to an index, a table des matières, but in fact, what we spoke to you about today is for the entire documents that need to be translation. So if there's a prioritization exercise that can be done, would be extremely helpful, and then we could prioritize. The only thing I would add from Madame Plouffe comment, as I mentioned, we can use the support of the private sector for documents that are not classified. And I understand that a lot of those documents may be classified at a certain level.
Okay, thank you. And for Mr. Shea, can you explain how the translation of documents carried out by the Public Order Emergency Commission met the Official Languages Act standard?
The translation was for external-facing documents, and so their website, everything but the evidence, and I understand that is in keeping with the Evidence Act, was translated in both official languages. The report itself was in both official languages, and interpretation was provided for all of the individual events. I cannot speak to, they are a federal organization. They have internal obligations as well. I can't speak to whether they adhere to all those because I was not there in terms of managing their employees and those pieces. But in terms of the external facing, everything that I've seen implies that they have met their obligations. If I could add one precision to what my colleague said, the $16 million quote that I think we just quantified as 10 months is for 8,000 documents. It's for the evidence that is on the website that was in one language to translate it. That is already a subset of the 152,000 files. And so if one was to extrapolate out, it's the same number of pages, and we don't know that until we look, multiply that by 19. And that's why we said in our first letter, over 300 million in many years, is because you see the cost. And that is why from the start I've been saying we would really like to find a solution that allows us to narrow that down in a way that is acceptable to this committee.
I just have about a minute left. There was, and I'm not sure who mentioned it, the use of AI, and this has been raised before at this committee as to what degree AI helps. Could you just explain how that works?
I will turn to the experts at the Translation Bureau to explain how they use AI.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I made the reference to automation and automated translation. We hear a lot of comments about artificial intelligence at the Translation Bureau. Would like to remind the members that since the 70s, the Translation Bureau used the dictaphone, one of the first organizations. Yeah. We were also one of the first organizations to use word processing device in the 80s. And obviously, we're looking at every possibility to use the automation or artificial intelligence. The complexity comes when we need to move into the secret environment, where, of course, we cannot tap on all the information that is available. That being said, the AI is not perfect yet. Things like the receiver general might mean something for some, might be something in the football world. So we really need to make sure that there's experts that are going through. So yes, it's helping us to go a little bit faster in certain documents. In the classified, I'm not saying that we're not going to get there, working with Shared Service Canada and other partners to try to leverage the intelligence. Other countries, as mentioned by another member, obviously are facing the same challenges. And as long as it is safe to do it, we're going to use it.
Okay.
Provided it doesn't impact any collective agreement work. Here we go. Back to you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Senator Carignan. 5 minutes.
Moi, je vous écoute, là.
I've been listening to you, and I am very impressed. I'm very impressed by Justice Rouleau, how he managed to read all the evidence and deliberated over 2 months to draft his report. He is an exceptional man. And it's worth repeating that. Now, looking at the list of documents from the PCO, you mentioned this. Now, there are lots of lawyers in the room. When a piece of evidence is presented, it is added into the record. Is there anyone at the Rouleau Commission who was working on that and taking note of the language it was presented in?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. They were responsible for managing the evidence and managing how it was archived. My understanding from legal experts, and I do not claim to be one, is that that information is not required to be translated in keeping with the Evidence Act.
Mais au-delà du fait que ça soit traduit ou non, il y a quelqu'un qui...
But beyond whether it was translated or not, someone was looking at the list of evidence, right? I mean, how were they doing that?
That evidence is actually on the website and available for public consumption. It is just not translated on the website. And so absolutely somebody was managing that, and somebody managed all the information which was transferred to us. But it was not necessarily transferred us into a format that can easily allow us to respond to questions like an index, depending on the definition of an index. For example, if you want an index that has a short summary, that's not something that's available to us. We can give something...
On va parler des témoignages. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer?
Let's talk about the testimony. Can you tell me how it is that testimony in French was translated into English? It took some time. And testimony in English wasn't translated into French. There are people interpreting in the booth. Tomorrow morning, we will be receiving the blues. We'll be able to review your testimony, our questions. It will be available in both official languages. How is it that at the Rouleau Commission, the PCO, and this is not your first commission of inquiry, how is it possible that that same service wasn't available?
Service. So we provide them tools, we provide them advice. Ultimately, they decide how to run each individual meeting. I am not aware, but I'm not speaking definitively on this, that they translated any evidence from French to English, as I think I understood from your question. My understanding is evidence came in the language that it was submitted, and it remained in that language. I also do not know that the entire report was drafted in one language or the other. What I do know is that the final report was in both official languages. It's entirely possible there was a mix of the two in the document based on the evidence and how it was presented. But I would be speculating because I'm not part of the inner workings and was not.
Conseiller, le pauvre juge, là, il arrive, là, il est nommé...
But the poor judge, he was appointed, and he had to start from scratch. We saw the same thing with another commission. You're the one who's there to provide advice and support. You know how things work. How is it that there was no simultaneous translation and people producing the translations of testimony every day? Didn't you provide that as advice?
In terms of the use of official languages, we would absolutely, and are for the current commission, recommending that any public hearings have simultaneous interpretation as part of that. And so to your point, there was simultaneous interpretation as I understand it. I believe you're going a step further to say it should not only be translated, but there should be the equivalent of kind of the blues that come out from this committee. That is not a requirement of committees or of commissions, and it's not something they have chosen to do.
C'en est une.
But it is a commission of inquiry. It's an institution created by an order that falls under the Official Languages Act. It was your responsibility to support the commission of inquiry, to make sure that documents was translated, that testimony was translated, that everything on the website was translated, which was not the case.
In terms of supporting the commission and all commissions, and I would echo what you said about, I worked with Judge Rouleau, and he is a fantastic human being and was wonderful to work with. I would say there's a limit to what we can do in terms of support. We don't dictate how they run their commission. We provide support to help them implement what they would like to do.
Senator Carignan, your time is up. We'll move to Senator Harder.
Thank you very much. I would share the enthusiasm my colleague has for Justice Rouleau, only I mean it.
Very impressive.
I just want to remind this committee that we've heard 63 witnesses over 2 years. We have all of their evidence in whatever language they gave it, plus the translation. We have all of their briefings, plus. What we're talking about here is what we as a committee asked for to be included in our deliberations was the Justice Rouleau's commission. And we then went further to say all the documentation associated with Justice Rouleau. We then went further and saying all of that documentation should be in both official languages. And if I'm correct, Mr. Shea, what I'm hearing from you is that Justice Rouleau's 2,000 pages, which are in both official languages, is consistent with the Official Languages Act and the practice of other commissions, and consistent with the practice of other commissions and the Official Languages Act. Other matters are in the language that they were provided. I'm a little worried that we're going down a rabbit hole in this committee trying to determine what else we need translated when we have a fair amount of evidence we've collected, all of Justice Rouleau's evidence, and we're now in our third year of deliberation. So my question, and I want you to confirm, Mr. Shea, that Justice Rouleau conducted his commission in accordance with the Official Languages Act. Have you heard or been in receipt of any complaints from the Official Languages Commissioner with respect to?
I did.
I will ask him.
I mean, I did the plane. I did the complaint.
I know, but I'm going to ask him.
Oh,
okay. He's the witness. Just an idea.
I received mine, I suppose.
And could you discuss how those complaints are being handled?
As your colleague mentioned, I do know we have received multiple complaints, and I was told in my briefing that one of them was from a member of the committee, and so I appreciate that disclosure. We receive those complaints and we answer them as best we can, appreciating the limitations of our knowledge of the interior workings of the commission. We have responded to indicate that there was a translated report, as you mentioned. There was simultaneous interpretation, as you mentioned. I do not believe we have got a final ruling from the Official Language Commissioner as of yet. But we will certainly adhere to the recommendations that come from that. And I would say with every commission, we learn something. And if there is an opportunity that comes from an official language complaint that tells us a better way that we can conduct the business, we are absolutely open to adjusting the advice that we provide. We would similarly, though, if we had to do more translation, when creating them, ask for additional funding, because that would increase the cost going in. And so that is certainly part of the considerations in terms of how much required translation there is. They're absolutely funded to do everything that's required. If they wish to do more, they have that option, but they would have to ask for money to do that.
Finished. We'll move to Senator Smith.
I'm a newbie on this particular committee, and I've been listening to all of the testimony, and I guess I don't think it's a simple question, but, you know, I've written down some of the facts about what's transpired here, and I guess in my mind is, because I come from a business environment, is there appears to be an opportunity to get together and make some decisions as to what exactly needs to be translated if something is missing. But I would think that between both groups, you would have a flow chart, and you'd have the key issues on a flow chart showing from the start to the finish what needs to be done. And I'm just wondering, has that taken place? Because it's nice to have everybody giving testimony, but, you know, there's so much data that you've given to us, and it seems to be kind of flying up in the air. And I'm just wondering have there been discussions in terms of taking the proper steps to have a solution that's going to benefit the whole group of people who are interested in trying to get a solution, as opposed to going around in a circle? And I hate to be rude, but listening to it for the last period of time, it seems to be a bit of a revolving door. Let's get by who's guilty or who didn't do their job. Let's get on with getting the problem solved. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I mean, God, I spent 30 years of my life running businesses, and I'd have probably some of you in front of me in a private office sort of asking these questions before we even got in here. Because we spent time. What have we accomplished?
I appreciate your question, Senator.
And I'm sorry to be blunt, but
Not at all. I appreciate the honest question. I think we have tried to provide a proposed path early on in the testimony. I think, respecting the fact, maybe just to differentiate from the business, we are not necessarily here to be your advisors. We are here to answer questions, and ultimately you have a team that provides you advice. If you were asking me my proposed approach forward, it would be for us to provide you with the index and file names, as I mentioned. I think there's a decision point that needs to be made at that point. Does that need to be translated, or are the generic names of emails enough for the clerk of the committee or others to start to go through it? So I think that's a first point. And then the next piece would be, based on that, translated or not, if you were to highlight either here are the types of emails we would like, or, for example, we can say where evidence originated from. You're most interested in information, for example, from a certain province or from a certain organization. If you help us narrow it, we could then say we've went from 152,000 documents to 5,000 documents, let's say. And then we could work with our partners to work on expediting that translation, our reviews, and that sort of thing. So very much that is what I would like to do, and what I am trying to propose in the most appropriate way possible, understanding that we are witnesses here and it is ultimately your decision what you will ask for. We very much want to find a solution because I don't think any of us think that the right solution is to spend years and years and not provide this in a timely manner. We want to provide you everything you need to do the work in a timely manner and in a translated fashion.
How is that going to happen now?
I would hope, I saw in the motion that invited us that there was some discussion of within 5 days a prioritization or a list of documents. We would like to work with whoever you ask us to work with. We're happy to work with the clerk of the committee directly to actually walk through this is what we have and make some determinations as to what would be appropriate in terms of how consensus will be reached by the committee behind the scenes in terms of what you would like from us, working through the clerk. We would be very pleased to dedicate our time to do that as fast as we can. Pardon?
Role of the Translation Bureau?
The role of the Translation Bureau would be to then translate whatever that, give us a quote, and I think we'd want to come back and make sure everyone open eyes knew, okay, this is what it is, this is what we think the translation would cost, and then I think ultimately if we are told that's what you want, we would try to start working on that.
It'd be an interesting partnership if you could work together. Everyone seems to be taking their spot, and good luck with it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll now move to second round. Mr. Brock and Ms. Romanado have 4 minutes. Mr. Fortin, Mr. Green, Senator Harder, and Senator Carignan have 3. Start with Mr. Brock. 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for your attendance. I have a brief observation, one question, and then I'm going to cede my time to Senator Carignan. My observation is to refresh my colleague Yasser Naqvi's commentary regarding that he's proud of a government that believes in bilingualism. Well, I think, quite frankly, all 338 parliamentarians believe in that. But to refresh his memory, thanks to Sir John A. Macdonald and Sir George Etienne Cartier, the British North American Act allowed bilingualism in Parliament. The Translation Bureau was the creation of R.B. Bennett's government, and simultaneous interpretation was introduced in Parliament by John Diefenbaker's government. And the right to simultaneous interpretation in Parliament was enshrined in the Official Languages Act by Brian Mulroney's government. So I'm very thankful for previous Conservative governments that really enshrined bilingualism in this country. That's my observation. My question to the PCO. 31,000 documents from Justin Trudeau's government were before the Rouleau Commission. How many of that 31,000 never saw the light of day?
I'm not sure what documents are on the website. I would have to see. I think we would have to agree on a definition of never saw the light of day. They were provided to the Commission of Inquiry, who reviewed them and had unprecedented access to cabinet confidences and top secret documents to do their work. And ultimately, they encapsulated their conclusions from reading those documents in that 2,000-page report that is on the website.
Glaring exception to that was the legal opinion that the Trudeau government relied upon to invoke the Emergencies Act. In fact, it was Justice Rouleau who essentially questioned former Attorney General David Lametti and essentially said, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just take your word for it? And David Lametti's response was yes, despite the fact that there was an order of this committee to release that very said document. So that being said, I'm going to pass my time over to Senator Carignan.
Senator Carignan, you have a minute and a half.
Verbaux du cabinet.
If I look, I am wondering, what I see is that the documents in cabinet were given in English only to the Rouleau Commission, but usually the documents are in French and in English. So did Justin Trudeau change the practice, and are the documents now only in English? Are the meetings only in English?
Senator, perhaps you can clarify where you're seeing that the documents were provided in English only and not in both official languages.
C'est les documents qui ont été fournis.
It's the documents that were provided to the Rouleau Commission. They were provided in English only.
All cabinet documents are translated, so absolutely cabinet documents themselves would be translated in both official languages.
Okay, donc ça serait facile de les avoir.
So it would be easy to obtain them in French. The MOU, the memorandum to cabinet, was provided only in English?
Which is required to be translated in both official languages. Okay. Individual memos can be sent up in French or English, and in my experience, there's a mix of the two, depending on the topic, depending on the originator.
Donc, pouvez-vous prendre l'engagement de nous envoyer les procès-verbaux?
Can you send us those documents in French, the ones that were sent to the Rouleau Commission? Can you provide those to us in French?
Sent in the language that it was available. So if it was a cabinet document that was translated, it would have been available in both official languages. If it was a memo that was created in English, it would be sent as an English document. If it was a memo that was created in French, it would be sent as a French document.
Up, we'll come back to you at the bottom of the list. Mr. Amato.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to be here tonight, and I'd like to thank our interpreters who are doing such extraordinary work tonight. I am also on the Procedures Committee of the House of Commons, and last year we did a study on the hybrid parliament and the impact on translation and interpretation, and the possibility of taking part in a virtual parliament. At the time, we heard very clearly that there was a lack of staff, a shortage for translators and for interpreters. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Limburger, adding this kind of project, will it compromise our capacity to do the work that we are doing in the House and in the Senate over the next few months? We know that until the end of June. It's possible that there will be sittings in the House until midnight, that many committees will add sitting hours and meetings, and that we will find ourselves in silly season with all the reports that will have to be translated. So I'd like to know, do you have the capacity, and have you thought of that increased workload? Because I don't want all of the work on Parliament Hill to come to a halt. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And it's true that our capacity in Canada is under pressure. Today we talked about AI, and the Translation Bureau plays a key role in language services in Canada. We work with universities to recruit translators and to train interpreters as well. Matthew Ball's team works on that, in fact, and we work overnight to produce the blues. Now, we have gone from 40 million to 55 million words. I know there are a lot of figures, but we look at number of words and financial figures as well. The estimate that we provided, 10 months for 124,000 pages, was took into consideration the workload that we know is coming. So we look at all possibilities to increase our capacity, and the key message here is that over the last 4 or 5 years, yes, AI has been helping us, but the number of documents that have to be translated also increases. So finding new translators and interpreters is an issue. Other departments also have financial pressures and are looking for solutions. And so at the moment, we are at full capacity at the Translation Bureau. Thank you. And that doesn't even take into account injuries that have been experienced by our interpreters. I'd just like to say that I don't agree with getting our documents in a single official language. If we receive any documents, they should be provided in both official languages. Thank you.
Fortin, 3 minutes. Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Shea, on June 13th, 2023, our committee adopted a motion to request translation of all documents. Since we didn't get a response on June 26th, we sent a letter to Mr. Hannaford, to your office, reiterating our request and asking for an update on the translation calendar. That I was on in September. And then on November 14th, that was 5 months after our motion asking for translation, you wrote to us to tell us, well, it's a lot of pages, it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to take a long time. Now, we said, look, if we can help you, tell us. And then you said, yes, you can help us. We want an index of documents. That was November 21st. We still don't have the index. You wrote to us on December 5th saying, well, to get you the index will take you a long time. Will take us rather a long time. So are you still intending to help us? Because if you look at how much time has passed, we've been asking for these translations for 9 months. And if I understand correctly, you haven't even begun the translation work. So are you really claiming that you're taking this seriously, translating documents into both official languages, applying the Official Languages Act? Are you getting directives from your bosses saying, forget about it, it's not important, we don't have time to translate these documents? Or is someone saying, well, look, I don't have time, I'm busy? What is the reason behind this lack of response. You haven't even started translation 9 months later. If you said to me, well, Mr. Fortin, we've started, but it's going to take us another year, that would be one thing. But you haven't even begun the work. You can't even give us any progress. Mr. Senator Carignan asked a question about the documents that were received during the commission. There's no one in this room who's ever seen anything of the kind. I'm a lawyer too by trade, and this is something that I've seen in many different circumstances. Often we discuss cases and we translate the documents. Commissioner Rouleau isn't an inexperienced person. Now, I don't understand how the situation came to be. How do you explain the fact that nothing has changed over 9 months?
Time is up. Maybe Mr. Shea, you can be very...
Ça fait 9 mois qu'on attend. Quand même qu'on lui donnerait une minute de plus.
It's okay. It's okay.
I can give him a few extra.
No, Madam Chair, if I could, in my round, look, rightfully so, these sections are comment and questions. That read as a comment, but I would allow them the opportunity to respond. There was certainly a lot placed and put to you in the last 3 minutes, and so I'll use my time to give you my 3 minutes to respond to his questions because I think they're important.